Joseph, is sold by his brothers, and he becomes a slave to Potiphar, the chief executioner of Egypt. Not exactly the job that his parents had in mind for a nice Jewish boy. But Yosef is very successful. He gets promoted, and Potiphar puts him in charge of his entire household. But Yosef, like all Jewish men, is devastatingly handsome. And so not surprisingly, his master's wife casts her eyes on him and attempts to seduce him. Day after day, she entreats him with specific, explicit suggestions that they sin. She tries everything, innuendo and insinuations and threats, but nothing works. He spurns all of her advances. Until one fateful day that the Torah tells us that Yosef showed up at the house to do his work. Two rabbis in the Talmud dispute what that phrase means. One says it means that he showed up to do his work. The other one says no. That day he planned to give in to temptation and sin with his master's wife, until his father's image appeared to him at precisely the right moment and convinced him not to sin. The simple explanation of this is that Yosef must have looked in a window or a mirror and saw his own face. And since he was a doppelganger of sorts, since he resembled his father facially, he saw himself, remembered his father through that same likeness, and in remembering his saintly father was convinced not to sin. Others say there was something deeper going on, that his father back in Israel, although he didn't know that Yosef was alive, maybe subconsciously realized that he was, and that he was in trouble. Like stories we hear of parents who feel that their children who are far away are having difficulty. And so somehow, through sheer force of will, he beams his image down to Egypt at exactly the right moment. And in fact, the Talmud records the conversation. Yaakov, Jacob's image, says to Yosef, "My son, your name is destined to be written on the stones of the ephod, alongside the names of your brothers, on the garment that will be worn by the high priest in the holy temple. But if you sin now, your name will be erased, and instead you'll be known for posterity as a companion of harlots." Is that what you want? And thus convinced, Yosef decides not to sin, and he flees the house. There's another story told in the prophets, in the book of Samuel, of a different father trying to save his son. King David HaMelech, faces a revolt led by his own son Avshalom. But David gains the upper hand, and he cautions his general and his soldiers not to kill his son. But his general doesn't listen, and he kills Avshalom. King David is told the heartbreaking news, and he screams out, "Beni Avshalom, Beni, Beni, my son, Avshalom, my son, my son." 8 times he mentions him. The Talmud tells us that with the first 7 mentions of his son, he's reaching down into Gehenna. He's reaching down into hell and ripping his son out of each one of the 7 levels of hell. I don't know what that means, that hell has 7 levels, but apparently Dante was on the right track. With the 8th mention of his son's name, David reaches down and rips his son out of hell and sends him into heaven, into the world to come. These 2 powerful stories are meant to teach us that sometimes a father or a mother has to reach down into hell to save a son or to save a daughter. And it works the opposite way too. Sometimes a son or a daughter has to reach down into hell to save a father or a mother, because there is no limit to what a father or a mother has to do to protect or save a child, or what a child has to do to protect or save a parent from harm or from sin.